In my last video, I made this bathroom vanity. It needs a sink, so that's what I'll make in this video. I've designed it in shape of 3D, so let's get straight into it and make a mould to form it out of concrete. I'll start by making the mould for the bowl of the basin, and I'll make it from plywood. High density foam board would be the easiest material to use for this, but I couldn't find any anywhere, so plywood will have to do. I'll just glue these pieces together without any nails or screws, as I need to shape and round over all the edges later, and I don't want to hit any hardware. The biggest amount of work on this project will be the mould, and the better I get it, the better the sink will turn out. Next, I'll cut some strips which will get glued to the inside of the mould. The roundovers on the outside will be pretty big and there won't be much material left on the corners, so these strips will help to hold it all together. I just need to add a few more blocks to the corners, then I can start shaping it. Next, I'll round over the bottom edge, and to do that I'll use a large round over bit in the router. The plywood I'm using is pretty cheap and it didn't play nicely, but I decided to keep going and fix it up with filler. As long as the mould finishes up smooth, it doesn't matter that there's filler in there. While that's setting, I'll glue on another piece of thin plywood. This will be the bottom of the bowl, which I can then shape with a fall towards the plug hole. Now I can smooth out the filler and start to shape the bottom of the mould. This is where the plug hole will be, so I need to ramp down the plywood from this point. I put pencil lines all over as a guide, but then I realised as I started sanding that the plywood veneers were an even better guide. I'm using a 40 grit disc, so it removed this in no time at all. That's pretty well shaped. Now I need to start making it smooth, and I decided to give it a coat of sanding sealer to start with. While that's drying, I'll make a blank for the plug hole. I started to turn it on the lathe, and then I decided to finish it on the metal lathe. It's a bit over the top, but it is easy to turn it down to the correct diameter. I've never turned wood on here before, and I don't plan on making a habit of it, but it worked great. Next, I need a disc, which will be for a recess for the waste outlet to fit into. Before I glue that on, I'll sand the mould, then fill out any voids. The last thing to do with this part of the mould is to coat it with epoxy, which will seal it in. When it's dry, I'll sand it, leaving a super smooth finish. The smoother I get the mould, the less work there'll be sanding the concrete sink at the end, even though I can tell you now it doesn't exactly work out that way. That's the inner piece done, so now I can fix it to a board and then start making the outside of the mould. While I'm sealing the mould to the form ply, I'll take the opportunity to let you know that my marking knives that I designed and made a few years ago will be released in my next video. It's a pretty cool and unique knife that many of you have asked about, so if you're interested, click the link in the description to get on the wait list. And as always, thanks for your support. Next, I need to build up the inside of each corner, ready for shaping into an internal radius. I'll make the inside curves by drilling through the corners with a Forstner bit. The only problem is the bit only goes so deep, so I made this extension. If you're interested, I made a full video showing how I made it, which is available on Patreon. I screwed a piece of plywood onto my drill press for a larger temporary table, which allowed me to clamp down the mould in place. It needs a bit of filler, but that works very well. I'll be lining the insides with rubber, so I'm probably going over the top with the filler, but it's easy enough to do, so I thought it was worth it. The reason for the rubber is I want to try and add a texture using this mat, which is lined with ribs. I'm not 100% sure how well this will work and how effective it'll be, but I thought it'd make the sink and the whole project more interesting. I want a band of texture around the middle, so I need to add smooth rubber strips above and below. It'll look something like this and hopefully be effective. The strips are sticky backed, but the textured rubber will need gluing down, which I'll do with contact adhesive. The join will be at the back of the sink, so if it doesn't look the best, it won't be visible. I reckon that looks great. Let's hope it looks just as good on the finished sink. Now I need to seal the edge of the outer mould, but I can't get the silicone nozzle or my hand down the side, so I made some modifications to the nozzle and I made a small tool to smooth out the bead. It still wasn't the easiest task, but it worked out better than I thought it would. The mould was a fair amount of work, but it's done and it's ready to go. This is the concrete I'll be using, and even though I've done a fair few concrete projects over the years, I've never used this glass fibre reinforced concrete before. I mix the dry ingredients in one bucket, then weigh out the water and ice, which stops it from overheating, into another bucket. Following the instructions, the mix needs to sit for 10 minutes before pouring, so while I'm waiting for that, I'll spray on some mould release. I prepared a second mould to use up any leftover concrete. I didn't put too much effort into it, but it might make a small planter. Next, I'll knock and vibrate the sides to help remove any air bubbles. I found the side of the sander worked the best, even though it probably wasn't the best thing for the sander itself. I covered it with plastic and left it for a couple of days, which worked out well as it was my birthday the next day and me and Kath went out for the day. Before going for the sink, I decided to see how this one went first. There were a lot of air holes, but I didn't vibrate this one at all. Fingers crossed the sink turns out better. The first thing I'll do is trim off the waste blank so I can turn it over and sit it flat. And don't worry, this is just an old saw that is blunt and well past its best. I can't see too much yet, but it looks promising. Now I just need to remove the mould bit by bit. That really does look promising and not too bad at all. There were a few air holes on the corners, but the flats came out great, and overall I'm very happy with it. This was a lot more work than I expected it to be, and if you give it a go, I would definitely try to get some high density foam board. I reckon it'd be much easier to remove. It was looking so good until I unearthed these ugly yellow stains. I realised straight away what I'd done. When I sanded the epoxy on the mould, I went through in one place and decided to wipe on some CA glue, which I did off camera. While it was in my hand, I got carried away and wiped it in a few places that really didn't need it, and I did that just to try and be sure. Anyway, it was a bad move, as apparently CA glue reacts with concrete. I tried everything I could think of to remove the stains and nothing worked, so the only thing left to do is sand it out. This diamond sanding pad that I've had for about 10 years did an awesome job, but it still took about 5 hours to sand it. I couldn't sand just the stains, as the sanded areas exposed the grain, which meant I needed to sand the whole thing to make it look even. Even though it was a lot of work, I preferred the look of it, so overall I think it worked out for the best. I left it overnight to dry out, then the next morning added a few coats of sealer. I almost thought I'd ruined it with the yellow stains, but I'm super happy with how it turned out, even though I wasn't expecting anywhere near as much sanding. Anyway, I haven't gotten very far with the bathroom renovation, so hopefully I can show more of that, and also installing the vanity and sink when I make another video of a mirror cabinet. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.